Hi, my name is Anna, and a few days ago, something happened that makes me sick. We moved to an East Coast town about a year ago to be closer to family, so close in fact that my aunt, her wife, and my cousins are only a 10-minute walk from my house. Granted, we are very spaced out and borderline rural despite living about 15 minutes from the outskirts of a big city. I was walking my two little dachshunds back home from my aunt's house. My mom hates it when I'm alone the majority of the day, so I spend time at their house, and I was genuinely enjoying my time. It was cold but quiet and oddly beautiful. I got home, fed my pups and two birds, and FaceTimed a friend. I was talking with them and doing chores, and was admittedly being loud and giggly when taking out the trash to the side of my house. I get back inside and lay down in bed, still chatting when my bird starts calling. Now, anyone who has ever owned a parrot knows that they have distinct noises for certain movements. She's been in my family for 76 years and with me my whole life, so I knew the sound was alarm or intrigue. I brush it off as her seeing herself in the window reflection and go back to talking to my friend. I get up to get water, and my back is to the sliding glass door, which is thankfully locked, and my friend has the wind knocked out of him. I'm confused, and I think he's hurt. He tells me, "Anna, go back to your room now." I scoff, but then I see it in my camera view. There is a man with his face and hands pressed up against the glass door. He's a middle-aged white guy in a gray pullover and dark pants and a grin on his face. My friend, ever the best in panicked situations, tells me, "Don't look at him, just go to your room." I was shaking so hard, I'm blubbering, and decide to lock myself and my dogs in my closet. My parrot is still going crazy. English isn't my first language, and it's bad when I'm in a panicked state, so I revert back to my native language, which my friend doesn't know. Luckily, my friend knows how to take charge, and he tells me he'll be over in 10 minutes, and he calls the police. I'm thinking I can run to my mom's room and find a gun, so if the guy does come into the house, I can blow a quarter-sized hole in his chest. I'm debating getting up when I hear tapping on my window. It's slow and intentionally creepy. My dog starts barking. I'm ready to accept my death. I'm a teenage girl home alone, and I'm about to die. Wait, my aunt should be leaving for work. I shoot her a quick text. The tapping stopped, and I think it's over when I realize something that makes my heart drop. I left the front door unlocked when I took out the trash. This keeps getting worse, and I beg my friend to hurry. The tapping thankfully returns to my window, and I can only close my eyes and hope that someone gets here fast. It feels like an eternity crying to another teen who's breaking multiple traffic laws. Never before have I been grateful to hear another man's voice yelling outside of my house at 1 a.m. It was my God-sent neighbor. Apparently, his pregnant wife was having bad nausea and went out on the deck. Where it's situated, you can see my whole backyard. She got a bad feeling after seeing the unfamiliar man approach my door and woke her husband to check it out. I thank God every day for her because I think she saved my life. I led my neighbors into my house, and my aunt arrives about 4 minutes later, packing major heat. My friend, not long after her, I go from home alone to an impromptu house party of concerned people. The police arrive like 10 minutes later, like they didn't just take 30 minutes to arrive at the scene. On a brighter side, my bird wasn't too alerted by this encounter and went back to eating not 5 minutes later, and my dogs were just happy to see people. My friend has been staying the nights with me since I'm finding it hard to be home alone despite the fact that an arrest was made. I'm so thankful that my neighbor had such good instincts and that my aunt and friend were so quick on their feet because this could have been a lot worse. I'm a girl living in Northern Europe. I won't go into too much detail where this happened because I don't want people to recognize me from this story. This story takes place in October when I had a part-time job in this research center. This was in a bigger city, not like in the middle of nowhere, but it was a 30-minute bus ride from where I lived at the time. Keep in mind that the workplace was in an industrial estate, so the only people that really spent time in the area were the workers from these companies. I worked all 3 shifts, mornings, evenings, and nights, but I did mostly night shifts because none of my coworkers really wanted them, and I am a night owl anyway. So that 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift worked well for me. This happened on one of these night shifts. It was a Thursday night, and I was one of the 3 workers there that night. We did not work together. We all were in our departments doing different kinds of work, all so far from each other in the building. I worked at a chem lab doing water analysis, so it was not any kind of customer service job. We were basically all alone, and it usually got really quiet and rather peaceful. We had no security guards, but it was quite impossible to enter the building without an identification card. All doors were locked, and everyone that worked there had these cards where you hold it in the sensor on the door, and it opens. You also got to use the card when leaving the building. These locked doors were not only on the outside, but also inside the building, so if someone somehow managed to get through the first door without the card, they could not get any further into the building. To the labs, for example, the door locks again immediately after you get in or out. Considering that we never really had to worry about someone uninvited getting in, even during the nighttime. This particular night, I took a bus and headed to work. I greeted my coworkers that were leaving as their shifts had just ended and met the other night shifters in the women's dressing room. All normal, I was in a good mood, and so were my 2 coworkers. When our shift started, we parted our ways and went to different labs. I was 3 hours into my shift at 1 a.m. when I decided to take my 20-minute break. My other 2 coworkers had their breaks earlier than mine, so I was alone. Our break room was this lounge where there were a couple of long tables, chairs, a mini kitchen, and a bathroom. I'm not going to lie, this big hall with old flickering ceiling lights was not my favorite place to be alone at 1 a.m. when the whole building is almost empty and it's pitch black outside. There were big windows in the lounge, but I could not see anything out of them, just darkness. There was always the same eerie vibe at nighttime, so I was used to it. 5 minutes into my break, I decided to go outside to smoke a cigarette. I put a jacket on, took my __, and opened the door with the card. We had this smoking place in the back of the parking lot about a minute walk from the door. If I said I wasn't scared to be alone in an empty parking lot at night as a young girl, I would be lying. This was the only thing I really did not like about the night shifts, but I really needed that cigarette. Nothing bad had ever happened, and I live in a generally safe country, so I just hoped for the best. There was this nasty white plastic chair in the smoking place. I sat in it and lit my cigarette. From the smoking place, I could see clearly to the entrance of the building. There were bright lights above the door. Usually, I just stared at that door without even noticing it. I mean, it was at night in an industrial estate, and there were not many interesting things to look at. All of a sudden, I noticed a person walking up to the door. It was a man with a trench coat and a top hat, holding a briefcase. I had never seen this man before in my work or anywhere near this place. This man stood still in front of the door, not moving at all, facing the door. Even though nothing seemingly bad happened yet, just a weird man standing by the door. I cannot even explain in words how scared I was. I had to somehow get past this man to get back inside. He wasn't aware that I was there. He didn't see me. What if he does something to me when I'm trying to get inside? Is he even trying to get inside? What does he want, and who is he? This was the only door where I could enter the building from the outside, so I had no choice but to try and ignore that man at the door and to attempt to get inside. What on earth is this weirdly dressed man doing in this area at 1 a.m.? There is clearly something he wants from us, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know what that was. I started walking towards the man and the door while he was still standing there, unaware that I'm behind him in the parking lot. The closer I got, the more scared I became. I had to stop and think again. I knew it was part of my job to confront unwanted people trying to get in and tell them how to contact our customer services, but keep in mind this was at 1 a.m. A weird man who appeared out of thin air and an 18-year-old girl alone. I had this gut feeling that I should not go to that door. I decided to call my coworker that was there that night and ask if she could meet me at the door and let me in so I didn't need to face this man alone. I hid behind my coworker's car that was in the parking lot to make the call. In the position I was hiding, I could still see this man through the car windows. I wanted to see if he would leave and where he would go. My coworker answers the call, and when I start whispering on the phone and explaining the situation, I watch in horror as the man turns around and stares right at the car I was hiding behind. I don't think he saw me, but he for sure heard there was a woman talking behind this car. What happened next is straight from a horror film. When this man found out there was someone behind the car, he slowly and quietly approached, not knowing I could see him through the windows. And here's the thing, he did not walk, he did not run, he was on all fours, crawling towards the damn car. I couldn't even scream, I just froze from fear and dropped my phone. When this man was getting closer to the car, I could see both of my coworkers opening the door, waving, and screaming at me to run and come in. They didn't need to tell me twice. I ran inside so fast that the man didn't even have time to react. When he got up and started running after me, the door was already closed. The second he heard the door lock itself, he turned around and started speed walking away, eventually disappearing into the darkness. We called the police immediately, and they arrived not long after. They didn't find anything or anyone. That man vanished as fast as he had appeared, and no one has seen him since. After that shift, my coworkers walked me to the bus and waited with me until it arrived, making sure I got home safely. I am forever thankful to these lovely women for opening the door for me before that man got to me and did God knows what. I haven't done any night shifts after that and definitely never will. 3 years ago, I was living with my then boyfriend in a one-bedroom apartment in a little mountain town. It was a half-basement unit, so the bottom of all of our windows were level with the ground outside. It was also an older apartment, and not all the windows could fully lock. One day my boyfriend comes home from work while I'm laying on the sofa and immediately runs up to the window near me and looks out of it frantically. He then goes to look out every other window in the house, then walks around the outside looking in the windows. When he comes back from this confusing exploit, I ask him what's going on and why he's doing that. I think I just walked up on a guy looking in the window at you. He took off as soon as I walked up, he tells me. This was naturally very unsettling, but after discussing it and considering the time of day and the number of people out and about around the complex at that time, we came to the conclusion that it was just a curious neighbor or someone passing by that happened to glance in. With that, we forgot about it. If only that was the end. For the next couple of months, odd stuff happened here and there. Someone would knock on the door occasionally, then when I went to answer, no one was there. I'd find things in my apartment that I wasn't familiar with, or things like clothing items would vanish. I didn't really think twice about any of it until one night. My boyfriend and I were arguing at about 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were being a bit loud. We were standing in the kitchen face to face. His back was to an open window with the blinds up halfway, and I was facing it amid our arguing. I glanced behind him at the window, thinking I saw the reflection of my face in it. The window was open, it wasn't my face. There was a man with his face pressed almost against the window screen, watching us. Given the fact that we were arguing and it was late, I thought for a moment it might have been a concerned neighbor walking up to the window to speak to us. So, I spoke to him. "Hello, can I help you?" I asked a little aggressively, thinking a neighbor was intruding on our privacy. He responded to this by staring unwavering and cold right at me. His face did not change expression. He did not blink or move. He just looked right at me in a way I have never been looked at before or since. In this instant, I also realized that because of the window being level with the ground, the only way this man's face could be where it was if he was laying on the ground outside the apartment or crouched and contorted to look into the window. My heart sank. I buried my face in my boyfriend's chest and closed my eyes in fear. My boyfriend, up to this point, thought I was messing with him. When I buried my face in his chest, only then did he say, "Is there really someone at the window?" I whispered yes to him. He felt my fear and took a moment before he turned around. By the time he did, the man was gone. It was at this point I started to think about all the odd little occurrences that I'd been experiencing. I assumed the worst. I filed a police report with his description, and my brother loaded my apartment up with weapons to protect me, or at least informed this Peeping Tom that I was armed. After that night, myself, my boyfriend, and my brother were on high alert. There were a couple of times when my brother came over that he saw a sketchy guy hanging around, and even one time he saw him look at my window. He tried to follow him discreetly, but the guy took off running as soon as my brother stepped in his direction. The last night I had an experience with this man, I was sitting home alone on my sofa. My boyfriend was at work at a restaurant about 2 blocks away. He had picked me up from work an hour earlier. We had sat on the sofa together for a little bit when we got home. Then he kissed me and left for work, locking the door behind him. After he left, I continued to sit on the couch on Reddit for a while in silence. After about an hour of me sitting there in silence, I hear a door creak open. It's a small apartment, so to see the bedroom and bathroom doors from the couch, all I had to do was lean a little to the left. I assumed it was one of my cats coming out of my bedroom, so you can imagine my shock when I lean over and see the door that's opening is the door to the water heater closet. I look to my right and see both of my cats sleeping soundly at the other end of the couch. I look back to the door, and it's still creaking open very slowly. It opens enough for me to see it, a set of fingers wrapped around the door, easing the door ever so gently to open it as quietly as possible. That was going to be a no-go from me, dog. I ran my ass barefooted out the door into the snow and down the street to my boyfriend's work. I called the cops when everyone was back to check out the apartment. He was, of course, gone after that. My boyfriend and I packed our went to stay with my parents, and 6 months later moved 1,000 miles away from that town. That was the end of it. I initially found this sub around that time as I was trying to find other stories similar to mine or people to talk to who had experienced something like I did. I had intended to write my story here eventually, and I figured after these events, I had to. I live 1,000 miles away from where all of this happened, so a part of me thinks there's no way this person could have found me. But last week, I heard a knock on the front door of my apartment. I was expecting a package, so I figured it was a delivery driver and didn't answer. I'd go get the package later. Then they knocked again and again. The third one made me feel uneasy, so I waited a good 20 minutes to check the door. When I did, there was no package, no note, no nothing. Someone was just knocking. Although it made me uneasy, I didn't initially think back to my stressful experience in my last town. Then, 2 days ago, I went out to get groceries. I have a little patio, and I go out there in the mornings to just chill or check on plants a lot, and I've been known to leave it unlocked in the day on accident. I never thought of it as a huge deal until I came home from the store 2 days ago, and the deadbolt to my apartment was locked, the deadbolt that can only be locked from the inside of my apartment, period. I assumed someone robbed me because I dumbly left my patio unlocked. I called my sister, I called my new boyfriend, I waited for people to be with me, and I went into my apartment through the sliding glass patio door. Nothing was out of place, nothing of value was taken. At this point, my heart sank. Nothing was touched, nothing stolen. Someone was inside of my apartment just because they wanted to be inside of my apartment. I told my boyfriend about my stalker, and he's not taking the lightly like my past boyfriend. I filed a police report. We checked for recording devices and cameras. He put Nest cameras up all over the place, and we are on high alert. I really truly hope this is a coincidence, but if this man really followed me across multiple state lines, there's no one on this earth I'm less interested in meeting. This started about 6 months ago. I was getting ready for bed in my room. It was maybe 10:30 p.m. My curtains were closed, so I couldn't see out of the window, but I heard 3 hard knocks on the glass. Of course, that scared the living out of me, so I didn't even look. I ran and got my dad and made him look. Now I live with my parents and 2 brothers in a fairly busy neighborhood, so noises weren't uncommon to hear. But this knock was directly on my window, so someone wanted me to hear it. The thing was, my bedroom isn't facing the front of the house or the road or anything. My room's actually towards the back of the house, so someone would have had to walk to the backyard to knock on my window, which seemed very odd. I had my dad check, but when he opened the curtains, no one was outside the window. He even went to the backyard to check, and no one was there. That was the first incident. I closed my curtains and brushed it off as me hearing things or some sort of animal. The following night, at almost the exact same time, I heard another 3 knocks on my window. I immediately went to get my dad again, only for him to see nothing once again. But this time, I didn't brush it off and slept in my parents' room on the floor. The next few nights, there was nothing until about a week later. I was home alone, and it was about 8:30 to 9 p.m., and I was on FaceTime with my friend when I heard another 3 knocks on my window. This time I was home alone, so I couldn't get my dad, but I ran into their room and called them. They told me to call the neighbors to check because they were out of town. So I did. The neighbors saw nothing. The night after that, it was about 1 a.m., I think, and I heard the knocking again. It wasn't 3 times, though, it was more. It woke me up out of a deep sleep. I was tempted to look out of the window to see who it was, but a large part of me didn't want to know. No, I went to get my parents again, who didn't even bother to check at this point because they didn't see anything the last few times. I kept hearing the knocking for the next few nights after that, to the point where I just ended up sleeping on the couch. My parents decided to let me move bedrooms, and so they moved my bedroom into what was the office and switched everything around in the hopes that I wouldn't hear any more things. After moving bedrooms, I didn't hear anything for about 3 nights. Then it started again, the same knocking, 3 hard times. This time I looked out of the window. I saw what I assumed was a man or a very big-built woman crouching down, wearing a gray hoodie and some dark jeans. I closed the curtains and got my parents and told them all about it. We called the police, but they couldn't really do anything about it because we had no solid proof besides my words. They advised we get a camera facing my bedroom and around that area of the house, so that's what we did. I haven't heard the knocking since, but I do wonder who it was. Nonetheless, it makes a good story to tell. One Saturday morning, I decided to go to my local Goodwill. I'm disabled and suffer from chronic pain. I use a cane on my good days and a wheelchair on bad days. Luckily for me, this was a good day. I parked out front and got out of my car, and immediately noticed a man sitting at the far corner in front of the Goodwill. As I was walking into the Goodwill, he shouted, "Miss, do you have any extra time for me today?" I'd never seen this man in my life and really did not want to engage with him. So I politely said, "No, sir, not today. I'm sorry," and I continued walking. He shouted something else at me, but I couldn't make out what he said, and I was afraid if I had stopped and asked, then he would try to engage me in a conversation. I ignored him and continued walking. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him begin to stand up. I walked faster and entered Goodwill, thinking I was in the clear. I began walking along the storefront, just looking at the items. My heart dropped when I glanced through the front window and saw him walking briskly towards the entrance. I immediately thought he might be following me. This has happened to me before at Goodwills, every time I've wound up in uncomfortable conversations where I have to continuously decline the advances of men I'm really not interested in. It's gotten to the point where I wear a fake ring when I go out so I can say I'm married because sometimes they accept that answer better than me simply not being interested in that moment. The disability left my body because I picked up my cane and booked it to the nearby rack of ball gowns and hid behind them. Through the gaps, I observed him storming into the store and start to look through the aisles. I was scared because he looked angry, maybe because I ignored him. I didn't mean to be rude, but I thought I'd made it clear in a polite way that I did not want to speak with him. I don't think it's wrong for me to want to go thrifting without having to engage with random men. The kind woman nearby came up to the ball gowns where I was hiding and pretended to inspect them. She whispered, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think the man in the blue is looking for me." She said she thought so as well, and I asked her if any of the nearby dressing rooms were open. She pointed to the one that was, and when I saw that the man had turned his back, I dived underneath the door and locked it behind me. I called my boyfriend from the dressing room in tears and asked him to come to the store soon. I heard a knock at the door. The kind woman had gotten a manager. She told me that after the man looked through all the aisles, he walked out, grabbed his bag, and left the area. They closed the dressing room I was in and let me hide in it until my boyfriend arrived. Then one of the male employees and my boyfriend walked me to my car. That was the end of it. Nothing really dramatic happened, and since we were in public, I don't think my life was in danger. But it was an unsettling experience. I hate to think of the possible confrontation we might have had if he'd found me. I'm just so thankful to the Goodwill employees and the kind woman who helped me that day. A few months ago, I was staying in my partner's apartment for a few weeks by myself. I don't quite remember why I was out that late, but it was around 1 a.m., and I had just gotten off transit. Only one other guy got off with me, and he was rather tall and walked briskly. I was ahead of him at first, but he quickly passed me because even though I have a quick stride, I'm pretty short for a guy. I don't normally live in that city, so I'm not sure why, but the streets were incredibly empty. I remember thinking that because there wasn't even a single car on the road. We were literally a 5-minute walk away from a major university, so it was very odd not to see a single person or car. The only lights were the street lights. I've spent nights at my partner's place before, and I never remembered it being this dead. Anyway, I walked down the street and was coming up to an intersection where I had to turn left. I noticed this guy standing around in front of the bank that was on the corner. The guy ahead of me walked past him with no problem and went straight. I was a bit wary, but I didn't think much of him until I was about maybe a meter away, and he had sidestepped to be in front of me and had held his arms wide open, grinning at me. I glanced in the direction of the guy who'd left the train with me, but he was across the street already. My heart was pounding at this point, and I think I may have started to disassociate from the stress because I can't remember what he looked like, even though I remember looking directly at him. If this sounds like an overreaction, I have a history of multiple cases of CSA'd by different people and have PTSD among other mental illnesses I struggle with. At the time, I was falling back into my disordered eating again. I was also underweight, in addition to being short, so definitely not the person you'd expect to win a fight, and I knew it. I remember being frozen for a moment, and then on instinct, I very politely said, "No, thank you." I took a step to the right towards the street and tried to keep walking forward. He moved in front of me again, still with his arms wide open, expecting me to hug him, still grinning for some reason. I repeated my polite refusal and sidestepped him again. Instead of running in the opposite direction, luckily, he let me pass, but I could hear him following me from a short distance. I was wondering what I could do in that moment. I couldn't find help. There was no one around. If I tried to call someone, he was close enough to grab me, and I wasn't able to run very fast. Suddenly, I heard his steps speed up into a sprint, and before I could react, he slowed down again. I walked a bit faster. He repeated the same thing over and over. I wondered if I should go a different path so he doesn't know where I live. It wasn't the best idea since I didn't know the city very well, and he probably knew it better than I did. I decided I knew I could find help in the lobby, at least compared to if I went somewhere else. He sprinted at me again, and I turned around and loudly asked him, "Do you need help?" I remember not feeling my body and feeling lightheaded from the anxiety. Despite how panicked I felt, my voice came out clearly, and I sounded disdainful. I don't think I meant to sound like he was annoying and inconveniencing me, but that's how it came out. Then he spoke for the first time and responded, "No, do you need help?" I didn't say anything to that and just turned back around and kept a fast pace towards my partner's apartment building. He was still following, but now he was talking. I can't remember much of what he said. I was just focused on getting back without being assaulted. Eventually, I heard him stop walking. "I know I'm scary," he said. I don't know why he said that. I took the opportunity to put more distance between us and kept up my pace. He didn't keep following, though. He just kept saying, "I know I'm scary." He got louder and louder the further I got. I got to the door of the apartment building and looked back again. He was no longer in sight. I unlocked the door to the apartment building and then ran up the stairs instead of taking the elevator. When I got into the apartment, I went straight to the window because the unit had a large window facing the street. I wanted to see if I could see him. Nothing. The streets were empty. I texted my partner about my experience, but he was already asleep and wouldn't see it. Luckily, I haven't seen that man again, and I hope I never will. Really not the way I wanted to spend my Saturday morning, but sadly, here we are. I'm writing this as I sit down, more scared and anxious than I ever have been. Beyond belief, I'm a female who was at my friend's flat. We were with her sister and also another female friend. Lots of good vibes and laughs, just normal girly time. At some point, a trusted nice guy and a bit of a smart aleck, but someone we wouldn't feel uncomfortable around arrived. Women know what I mean, especially about the nice best friend to the girl guy. Anyway, he was very approachable at first, very polite and sweet. But I was always told never to trust anyone who is nice on first appearance. It's usually overcompensation for something or to hide something evidently darker, as I found out later on. He slowly became more argumentative and had a very patronizing, condescending tone, which would rise for no reason. He acted like he was being completely normal despite being passive-aggressive. It was a quick turn. Moving on, he attempted to take my water bottle and insisted to everyone for no reason when I took it back out of his pocket, which is weird. Anyway, who put someone else's water bottle in their pocket? He then insisted it was his, and that he brought it with him and genuinely seemed to believe it was his. This was when I got a weird gut feeling something was just not quite right. We then proceeded to have a back and forth, nothing harsh said, but I told him he thinks he's the smartest person in the room, and I could see right through him. Quite an assumption to make about someone, but as a human, we can sense danger. Then, to top this already slightly alarming experience, he started pulling very vulgar sex faces and hand motions. Not even in a jokey way between friends. He did it every time he got the chance. He was pretending to do some weird sex motion. Needless to say, I was very disgusted, as I barely even knew him, and it wasn't in a banter type way where it was left off as a little one-off. But he repeatedly did it. He did this to me as no one was looking and stood slightly behind my friend, who was talking, so we could make these ugly gestures to me. He kept asking me to come back to his and told me he wants to take me abroad as he needs someone to look after him when drunk. I told him I'm not a babysitter in a bit of a joke way, and he straight away went very stiff and defensive. The slightest thing seemed to trigger him. After being in a high-alert abusive situation for many years, sadly, you recognize even more so that something in the air just isn't right. Even if you're not 100% sure, if you got a feeling, always follow it because it's there for a reason. There's absolutely no need for taking chances. Sadly, this world is too unkind. Anyway, my friend had gone to bed. My friend's sister was getting ready to leave, but I was very reluctant to be left alone with him for obvious reasons. She ordered a taxi and asked him to walk her out to it. He agreed, and I told him very bluntly I'm locking him out. His immediate response in a very nonchalant manner was, "Yeah, I would." That, for some reason, was what made me double down wholeheartedly on making sure I locked him out. Despite my friend maybe getting upset, I've locked another friend out. I wasn't too concerned about what they would say, as I knew in my heart this man had ill intentions. I got the vibe he was pre-warning me, a bit like an animal playing with his food before eating. He was enjoying being weird and making me uncomfortable. As he walked out the door with my friend, I immediately locked the door, and thank you God and Jesus above that I locked the door. More, as usually I would forget, but in this instance, I'm forever grateful. I turned the lock, thinking I was free of this weird creep. I heard talking at the door and someone trying to slightly push it open. I told him I was feeling scared and don't feel comfortable at all in his presence. I called him a weirdo and a creep, and his response was, "I'm not that weird." But he said it in an inquisitive positive way, like he was trying to convince himself. And not at any point did he take offense to my dramatic accusations and labels. I told him he had suppressed sexual urges and that he won't be taking them out on me. He then proceeded to say, but not in a cute way. It was in a very apathetic, weird tone. Even in these interactions, I was panicking more because instead of just thinking he was a run-of-the-mill normal creep, I was digging into something much weirder and darker. He proceeded to attempt to open the door again, begging just to talk to me for 2 minutes. And weirdly enough, I couldn't make out if it was actually him through the door, as I had bad eyes. But I knew it was him, obviously, due to the conversation we had. He stood outside for 15 minutes, pretending to book a taxi, and he kept repeating that our mutual friend was gone. He then left, and I was on high alert. I was standing by the door, and out of nowhere, I saw a white guy. The original guy was not white, so I noticed it wasn't the same person. He walked straight over to the door and covered the peephole with his thumb. This made my heart literally quiver. I was genuinely scared for my safety in a way that was very unsettling, and I hope no one else feels that fear, but those that know your heart just sinks in this horrible way. The door was the only thing separating me from this utter evil predator. What made it so weird is that he was attempting to get a friend to come around and that we should all go out to the town. It's weird as no one was dressed for such outings, but looking back, that second guy who came to the door ever so randomly and covered the peephole looked like he left something on the floor. But I'm obviously not going outside to check as I panicked so bad. I don't remember if I saw him leave the little hallway or communal entrance, but I'm not sure if he did. I woke my friend to tell her she could see I was so scared. I told her what happened, and she said she's never had anything like this happen and how she doesn't know an older white guy saying that she's a 24-year-old Jamaican woman and just doesn't happen to know any middle-aged white guys. It wouldn't have been so scary, but the way he just came right to the door and immediately covered the peephole, it was like he knew someone would be looking through there. I believe maybe this was connected because what are the odds of this happening so close to each other in about a 10-minute difference and not have some form of connection? Either way, please remember to lock your doors. It saves lives, as simple as it is. If that door had opened when he attempted due to being unlocked, who knows what I would have endured. I've never had anything this creepy happen, and I live in a big city, and I have a slightly unconventional lifestyle, so I have seen it all. People are very dangerous. Please be aware if you feel something isn't right, it's not. I hope you enjoyed that, guys.